In years past, we would go through these slides as a part of the very beginning of the year. It would take way too much time, and we would lose actual time for talking about actual chemistry. So I hope that you appreciate the changes on this. We will try to fly through some of these as fast as possible, as this should not take much more of your time than needed. We are looking at Unit Zero's lab safety. It is probably one of the most important ones because we constantly do labs throughout the year, and therefore it is one that is constantly repeated over and over again, such as the information that you will see through the course of this video, and may have also seen when we have covered some of the rules in the lab. Some of the parts of this video will be expanded on when we go over the rules of the lab. As I said previously, science is a hands-on laboratory class. You're going to be doing many labs, some of them chemical-based, some of them not chemical-based, and the chemicals that are used will have various hazards that will require you to use some of the skills that we will cover. Science safety in the science classroom is not just important for you and me as the student and teacher, but also your parents. They definitely send you to school with the impression that we have your best interest at heart, and that is why following the rules for lab safety is so important. You have been given and it is also asked that you sign both by you and your parent and or guardian before you can actually participate in the laboratory. Also, the lab safety test that has the general equipment part on top of it must also be passed. These are non-negotiable items. When entering a science classroom, especially one such as mine, you will find that we do a lot of different labs, and being as that I teach 3 different classes, not all labs that are set up are for your class. So it is important that you do not play, mess with, look. I try to identify. If you are doing a lab, you will most likely be given the heads up that you will be doing a lab the previous day, because usually there is a pre-laboratory that is necessary. So it is important that you conduct yourself in a manner that would allow for that safety to. Most of the labs have a lot of the instructions written out for you. We do change some of these instructions as sometimes equipment changes, what type of chemical changes depending on whether the lab can allow for that or not. It is important that you do not work alone. It is important that you do not work without my presence in the lab. That is, you will be put into groups of 2 or 3. After that, the groups become too large, and therefore we have to split the groups, and so therefore some of you will be in groups of 2 or 3, but no groups of 4. That would be a group of 2 groups of 2. When you do have a lab, it is important that you prepare for laboratory. Read all the procedures, prepare your lab book accordingly for that class. But reading the procedures thoroughly, because as sometimes we will change, modify, and go through some of those things, it is important that you kind of know where everything is. It is safety, from a safety aspect point, going through the lab, when I'm going through the lab the first time, is not conducive to your success, and or your safety as we go through the lab. It is important that this information here, horseplay, practical jokes, pranks are dangerous and prohibited. That can allow for expulsion on lab days, and therefore labs will need to be made up on a morning basis only. It is important that anytime we use chemicals, heat, and or glassware, that you will wear your safety goggles, unless I have give you very specific instructions otherwise. In the high school classroom, your goggles are provided in the white cabinet that is locked, and then they are cleaned after every hour. And so it is important that you wear those safety goggles. It is kind of one of your last lines of defense. It is important that you protect your eyes, not your forehead, which a lot of people. This table here shows a great amount of information and shows you just how potentially dangerous some of the chemicals we use can have, so just how dangerous they are. Discomfort being at a very low, that's a hydrogen concentration that shows how strong the acid more or less is in there, and this is for a hydrochloric acid. You will have also seen some of these effects if you had ever cut into an onion and your eyes start to water. That is the sulfur, I believe it's sulfur trioxide reacting with the water in your eyes to make sulfuric acid, and that discomfort that you're feeling is a very low concentration of hydrogen in your eye that is making an acid, and your eyes water to dilute the acid, and that is that is kind of your body's mechanism. Also, if you look at you putting shampoo in your eye, although shampoo would be more of a base, but still, acids and bases are just as bad, although a lot of times more people focus on just that. We tend to use acid that is stronger than this, and so therefore, and you can see that the effect can be severe damage to your lens and your eyeball. And those are things we want to avoid. And that's why it is so important to wear our safety goggles. When you are given the forewarning of doing a lab, it is important that you dress properly. Wearing your Sunday best is not always the most appropriate things. Long hair is asked to be tied back, both male and females. Dangly jewelry, baggy clothing, seems to be scarves tend to be a big fashion thing now, and so that would be in that baggy clothing or loose clothing. If you do have to dress up for sports or some others type of an event that requires that you dress up, we do have lab aprons, and they can be provided for you, and should be worn for any and all laboratory activities in which harsh chemicals are being used. It's important to know where this different pieces of safety equipment are located. I feel not only where they are located, but when they should be used. This is a small number of safety equipments that we have. I will go through this more extensively in the classroom so that I would be able to show you where that is. Also know where the fire alarm and exits are located and which door to go through in case there is a fire. And like I said just previously, this will be gone through a little bit more extensively in class. It is important that all the chemicals in the lab are to be considered dangerous. It is commonplace now for many high schools, not just ours, to use household chemicals in the chemical laboratory. This serves two purposes. One, you get to see that there are chemicals in some of your household products, shows you chemistry in your household. It also is a cost saving thing, and so therefore you will use some chemicals that you have in your house. Some of them you may or may not have ingested. And it is important that you do not do that. A lot of these chemicals are put into storage bottles that housed chemicals at one time, and therefore there is what we would call cross contamination, and therefore it is important to do that. The proper technique for smelling a chemical is one that will be demonstrated to you as it says. It is called wafting, and it might seem funny and or silly, but it is something that can definitely save parts of our senses that we might not think about, and it can be very bad if you do not properly find those fumes out. So as again, that will be something demonstrated to you in the classroom. It is important that you check the bottles of your chemicals twice before and removing all any of its contents. Sometimes, as I said prior, we have more than one lab going on at one time. Sometimes you might be asked to look for different chemicals, some very similar, so it is important that you check those bottles twice. It can be a matter of seeing what you're supposed to see in a lab versus not. It can be handling of a chemical that is stronger than you need, which can have catastrophic failure of the lab, or the lab just does not work, and you don't again see what you're asked to be and observe what you're asked to observe. So it is important. You returning unused chemicals to their original container is again something that needs to happen. We do not dump solutions back in. A lot of the glassware that you use is cleaned, but again, they are being cleaned by other students, and it is usually the best understanding to go that it is not fully clean to the best and highest of standards. We do clean as much as we can, take them down, and my TAs will clean them more thoroughly, but it's a time factor and not always something we're able to do. So we are waiting for you to clean your glassware even better than the hour previous. Disposing of all chemicals and waste properly, it is important. We do not put anything down the sink and or drains unless I tell you to, especially for some chemicals are not good to go down the sink, as they should not enter our water supply or even our wastewater, and therefore it is important. I usually will have a beaker or a vial or flask at the front of this classroom when that is necessary, and so it is important. Solids, for some reason, metals and matches, filter papers, these are insoluble materials and should be disposed of in the proper waste containers, not in the sink. For some reason, it is not just previous years, but for I think in years future, that for some reason students think that the sinks look like trash receptacles, in which they are not at all. I have two trash bins, definitely well within walking distance for you, and it is important that the trash goes in the trash. Disposing of broken glassware will be talked about in just a if there is any apparatus to be set up, I will instruct you how to do this. I will go through it in the front of the classroom, and but still reading the classroom is important. If there is a limit on the number of chemicals that we have, a lot of times they are at your lab station. But if your lab station does not have the chemicals, you will be asked to weigh or mass out the chemicals at the front of the room. And it is important that you bring the proper small container to the area. Again, a lot of this will be told to you when we go over labs that have these things happen. If you do have a spill, it is important that you let me know so that I can tell you how to clean it up. As in, if I try to clean it up, I am then exposing myself to the chemicals further. Whereas you are around the spill, and sometimes having you clean it up is actually the more safe thing to do. As again, most of these chemicals can be cleaned up by you. If it is in a manner that I feel I need to get involved, I will. But a lot of times I will be able to tell you how to clean it up. If there is something that happens, it is important that I am told as soon as I can, especially if you see any conditions that are unsafe. I do a visual inspection of the lab every day that we do a lab. If not every day that we do a lab, even on notes day, I will look around the classroom and make sure that any and all of the equipment that you will be using is important. If you do have spill, breakage of any glassware, cut, burn, etc., let me know so I can get you treatment or let you know how or what to expect. Sometimes if you spill hydrochloric acid on your hand, it's wash your hands very thoroughly 2 or 3 times, and then you might and kind of give you a heads up on what you may or may not expect. If you spill hydrochloric acid on your clothing, a couple drops here or there, chances are you will most likely actually ruin your clothing after a couple washes, and that's why we have our lab aprons. If you have broken glass, it is important that you clean it up, and especially cleaning it up properly. I will talk and show more about what equipment to use in this. It is the red dust mop, and it goes into the red trash receptacle, so red matches with red. And again, this will be something that we talk more about in the classroom when we talk about the rules. You'll pick up some of the glass if necessary. I will try to pick up more of the other stuff. And again, we never pick up with our hands. It's always with the dust broom, as in to avoid potential cuts from the broken glass. That's usually what happens. That's usually where most cuts happen in the classroom. And that's because people try to pick up pieces of broken glass with their hand because you've done it before, you've broken a plate at home, you feel comfortable. Unfortunately, again, safety in the science classroom is a little bit different than home, and it is important that you pay attention. You need to treat all that it should say dangerous. That picture didn't look like it covered it up. Any and all spills is dangerous. And let me know, and so that I can tell you how to clean it up. Most water and paper towels work great, and then washing the surface to make sure that any of the salts after the water is evaporated aren't left there for the person that uses that area after you. Again, if you see any time that a person may need, it is important that you let me know. It is important that you do not come in contact with another person's blood. If there is a cut, we have to instruct you or them how to self-treat, as in to control any and all of the bleeding. We don't see too much of this in the lab. And then it is important that if there is blood in the area, that it is properly cleaned up, not by students. We have a very specific blood-borne pathogens protocol that we have to adhere to as a school district, and therefore that is why if there is any blood at a lab station, we have to remove ourselves from that lab station so that the blood can be cleaned up. Fire drills happen randomly throughout the year. It is important that you know what to do in case there is a fire in this classroom, in the hallway, or somewhere, and or if even a fire drill during a laboratory period. I do not change my curriculum or the time of anything if there is a fire, indoor fire drill in the during the class day. It is important that certain things be done, such as closing into all containers, but that would already be done because after you take your sample that you need, you always close the bottle. The gas valves should be always turned off, electrical equipment turned off to the best that you can. I will hit the fail-safe on the way out to make sure that any and all of the electricity and gas to the areas surrounding the lab are also turned off. So please pay attention to what needs to happen, and listen to me, don't freak out, and things such as that. So it always is important, again, to listen. This is one of the last questions on your lab safety test, and that is what to do in case of a fire and or fire drill. It is important that leaving the room shut off any indoor gas and electrical equipment. You leave the room through the doors on and turn right. If the fire is on the right, I guess obviously you would have to turn left, but normally the closest exit would have us leaving the classroom doors and turning right, walking to the first set of double doors on the right, and walking across the street safely, as a lot of times, if there is an actual fire, emergency vehicles will be using Market Street as a means to get to the fire, so it is important that we get across. And then the street, and then meet behind. It is no longer a white shed. It needs to get repainted, and it is the shed by the tennis courts, behind the shed of the tennis courts. It's just a little bit further away. It's just a location in which all my students in all my other previous classes know that that is where I meet, and so therefore I can do a head count, make sure that we have everybody, and so we are in the proper place, we have everything done, and when given the all clear, if it is a fire drill, we put ourselves back into the classroom and continue on as we can. That is the end of the notes for the lab safety unit. Again, some of the slides will be gone in further depth in a different manner in front of the classroom as a needed basis. So it is important that you do hopefully you've looked over this video and in preparation for your lab safety test.